Hi, I'm Tricia Scott. A lot of you probably have seen me running around Constellation, generally wearing double bandoliers full of multicolored Sharpies, and doing readings and hosting a few panels on subjects like Sons of Anarchy, Supernatural, stuff like that. A lot of you also probably already know that I'm a writer. I'm very active on a community called Hit Record, which has made a short film out of one of my pieces. That short film is available on YouTube. It's called First Stars I See Tonight. Um, and you're welcome to go check it out if you want to. That one is actually not science fiction fantasy related. That one's actually an autobiographical piece. But I do contribute to Hit Record quite frequently, and I usually contribute pieces that are science fiction and fantasy, and some horror as well. I do love to write genre fiction. Um, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that just because the piece I have to read is very, very short. Um, One of the things that I have noticed when I talk to people who are just getting started writing is that they're asking me a lot where I come up with ideas. And I think the best advice that I can give you, honestly, is don't talk yourself out of stories. That happens a lot. People will say, oh, well, I had this idea, but then I thought about it and I decided it wasn't anything. But how do you know? I mean, maybe you turned it over a couple of times in your head and didn't think it would go anywhere. But have you really tried to put it down on a page? I think one of the most amazing things about science fiction, fantasy, horror isn't just the diversity of subgenres you've got to work with, but also the fact that your job as a writer of those kinds of genre fiction really is to ask yourself, why not? Don't talk yourself out of a story going, why? Instead, ask yourself why you think those can't connect and then figure out a way around it. Problem solve. Um, you know, it's also an important part of writing to actually write. I know that that advice sounds horribly trite, um, but you know, any kind of writing guide I've ever read from writers that I truly respect and whose work that I find mind blowing or really exciting or extremely engaging, every single one of them says you've got to log that behind in seat, pen in hand, or hands on the keyboard time writing. Because the only way that you're going to get better at writing is to actually do it. It is definitely, unfortunately for some, I suppose, a learn by doing process. Um, I do try to write something every day. It doesn't have to be a big something. There are days that I sit down and all I've got in me are a couple of sentences or maybe a couple of hundred words. And then there are days where I can get thousands of words onto a page. And a lot of that has more to do with how much I know about the characters and where they're going in the story than it does about feeling inspired. If you wait for the muse to show up, the muse will never come. That's it's the easiest way to talk yourself out of writing. Um, if you're not sure what to write, I definitely highly recommend seeking out writing prompts. Find yourself uh, some writing tools that get your creative juices flowing. There's all kinds of really cool uh, writers' idea decks out there. Um, if you're into D&D or any other type of RPG, there are all kinds of charts for game masters that you roll a dice to randomize settings, characters, monster encounters. So if you just need something to happen so you can write, that's a really good way to do that. Or you can take something as simple as a deck of cards and draw a card and write something based on the card. And they can be playing cards, flash cards, game cards from a specific game. It's really only limited by your own imagination. And I feel like if you're interested in Constellation, and if you're interested in science fiction, fantasy, horror, then you've already got an imagination. You're good. You can also get things like those stones that have words printed on them, uh, and put them in a bag or a jar or a bowl or something and just randomly draw one out, and whatever word you draw, you write a piece based on that. And you don't have to write for an incredibly long time either. If you start your habit out small, you can really grow it out and get to the point where you're writing more every day. You do have to make some time for yourself to write. And sometimes you have to start out with, today I will write for 5 minutes. You're not looking to write Shakespeare on your first draft either. And that's another really common thing I hear from people when they're trying to write. If they come and talk to me and ask me a little bit about how I do what I do, where I get my ideas, things like that, one of the things that will come up is, well, but I write things and I don't like them, so I throw them away. Or I start to write it in my head and I don't feel like it's true, so I never write it down. And one of the things I'm going to tell you right now is a first draft is called a first draft for a reason. Nobody has a perfect first draft. What you need to do is give yourself permission to write complete, total, utter garbage. Even if you sit down today and write for 10 minutes and all you've written is absolute crap, that's okay. Because you can't fix a draft that you don't have. And that is the really wonderful thing about writing, is that you can put something down on the page, you can make yourself this draft, and it's not a final product. It's raw material that you can then shape. You're going to have to learn to be your own critic. You're going to have to learn a little bit about being your own editor if you're just starting out. But once you start getting those skills together, and a lot of that comes from reading. You read the things that you like and think about how come you like them. Maybe one of the authors that you really love does sensory descriptions really, really well. Maybe another author that you like makes great characters. Maybe there's another one who transports you into their settings so vividly that you feel like you're there. Look at what those authors do and think about it. And sometimes you can imitate them. I think almost every writer really gets started because they've read something and didn't like the way it ended and went, I can do better. Or they started out with something somebody else wrote and thought about different ways that story could go. Maybe there was a different character other than the main character that they liked, and they wanted to know what happened with them instead of this protagonist that took over the story. So it's a really good idea to read things that you like and to figure out why you like them. it can take a little bit of the magic out of things once in a while because you're picking things apart. And you also need to pay attention to the things that those writers do that you don't like. Because by understanding how that work fits together and what they've done, it will help you improve your own writing. Um, and I'm not going to pretend that that's easy. It really isn't. Um, you have to decide um, that you want to pursue this idea of making your writing better. And as far as that goes, you don't even have to do that. If you just want to start writing, get yourself a notebook and a pen or open up a file on your computer and just write. Don't set out to make a perfect story or the great American novel or the next great work of genre fiction. Instead, write for yourself. Write something that you want to read. And be a little bit gentle with yourself at first. Understand that it is a first draft. It's not going to be perfect. You will need to do some cleaning up on it. You'll need to do some polishing on it. You may have continuity things that you need to fix. And all of that is okay. Nobody ever has to see that glorious mess that is this first draft that you threw in a file or wrote down in a notebook. That's for you so that you can practice your craft. Um, I've had a lot of stories that started out, and there were parts of them that I liked, and then I edited and cleaned up, and they became a lot different than I thought they would be. But I do feel like they ended up being much better stories in the end. I will say, I don't like to edit. It's hard. And one of the reasons that editing for me is hard is because I will find those clunky sentences, or I will find misspelled words, or I will find continuity errors or half sentences, things I thought I said that I didn't, but the bones are still there and I can figure out what I meant to do. And then I can clarify it or work with it or fix it somehow. So the biggest things I think I would say to take away from this, if you're still watching, is to remember that your writing isn't going to be perfect the first time, but you can always make a draft that you've created better. You can't fix what doesn't exist. You can't work on what doesn't exist. And if you never commit words to a page, then you can't really become a better writer either. So, and now, with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and do a reading for you. I am, like I said, a big fan of genre fiction. That's what I prefer to write. And this story is called Playtime for Vel. I've been working from home for almost 2 months now, and the cat has definitely adjusted. Vel gets fed in the morning and at night. While I take calls and type, he either curls up on the table next to my computer or settles his furry bulk on my lap to supervise me while I pet him with one hand. He's become an unofficial member of our team, since he's been joining our Zoom meetings from day one to peer suspiciously at the rude guests who have not offered him the appropriate tithes in the form of tidbits of food or his proper due of all the petting because he is a magnificent example of the feline form. They talk to him, though, which keeps him coming back. Today isn't a video conference day, so it takes me until almost 10:30 before I realize he hasn't joined me in one of his accustomed spots. He isn't watching the squirrels in the yard or making that weird high chitter he uses to warn the birds that they're courting death by invading his yard. He's also being quiet. I get up because a completely quiet and non-visible Vel is one who's causing messy chaos somewhere in the house. The last time he was silent for this long, I went upstairs to discover an empty toothpaste tube and crusted over blue gel smears across the sink, the wall, the mirror, and the floor. Vel also needed a bath. I hear a trill from my bedroom. It's his curious noise, and those sometimes end badly. I hurry down the hall and find him sitting on my bedroom floor, peering at a circle of purple light about half the size he is. He trills again, and his favorite toy, a rainbow-striped foam ball with a jingle bell in it, rolls out of the portal. He smacks the ball with his paw and watches. His ears swivel forward and he crouches, rocking his backside back and forth, while his tail lashes from side to side. A few seconds later, the ball rolls back out. Vel smacks it in again. Then he hunches himself back. Immediately, I snatch him up from the floor before he launches himself through after the toy. "No, Vel, no!" Vel yowls a protest. Then I hear a deep, grating voice rumble from the portal. "No more kitty?" "No!" I shout. "No more kitty!" "Fine," the voice says. The portal shrinks to a pinhole, then disappears with a pop. It did not give the ball back.